Metallum Obsessum. The Cursed Car of Creole New Orleans, Chapter 1. The envy of Father Lucien. The Creole region of New Orleans was a place where the past and present danced together, where every cobblestone and every whispering willow had a story to tell. The streets were alive with the sounds of jazz, the aroma of Creole cuisine, and the distant hum of the Mississippi River. But beneath this vibrant tapestry of life, there were darker tales that made even the bravest souls shudder. Henri Duval was a man of simple pleasures. He loved the feel of the wind in his hair as he drove through the French Quarter, the taste of a cold beer on a hot day, and most of all, he loved Celestine. With her raven-black hair, emerald eyes, and a voice that could make angels weep, she was the love of his life. They had met at a Mardi Gras parade, and it was love at first sight. Their love was the talk of the town, a beacon of hope in a city that had seen its fair share of darkness. But there was one person who didn't share the city's joy at their union: Father Lucien. A tall, gaunt man with piercing blue eyes, Father Lucien was the priest at St. Louis Cathedral. He was a man of God, but he had a secret. He was deeply, obsessively in love with Celestine. Every Sunday, he would watch her from the pulpit, his sermons filled with fire and brimstone, but his eyes filled with longing. Henri, being a man of the world, had sensed the priest's feelings for Celestine. But he had dismissed them, thinking, what harm could a man of God do? But he had underestimated the depths of Father Lucien's obsession. One evening, as the sun set over the Mississippi, casting the city in a golden hue, Henri took Celestine for a drive in his prized possession, a black ragtop convertible 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. The car was his pride and joy, a symbol of his success and his love for Celestine. As they drove through the French Quarter, the wind in their hair, the world seemed perfect. But as they passed St. Louis Cathedral, Henri noticed a figure in the shadows. It was Father Lucien, his eyes burning with a mix of rage and desire. The priest stepped into the light, revealing a face twisted with jealousy. He pointed a bony finger at Henri and muttered a curse in a language older than the city itself. The car's engine roared to life, its headlights glowing with an unnatural light. Henri tried to control it, but the car had a mind of its own. It sped through the streets, narrowly missing pedestrians and other vehicles. Celestine screamed, holding onto Henri for dear life. Suddenly, the car came to a screeching halt in front of the cathedral. Father Lucien approached, his eyes filled with triumph. "You may have her heart," he hissed, "but I have your soul." With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Henri and Celestine shaken and terrified. As they drove away, Henri glanced in the rearview mirror. The reflection showed not his face, but that of Father Lucien, his eyes filled with malice. The curse had begun. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Ritual. The night was thick with anticipation. The moon, a slender crescent, cast a pale glow over the city, making the shadows seem deeper, the silences more profound. Father Lucien, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear, made his way to the heart of the bayou. The swampy waters whispered secrets of old, and the trees stood like silent sentinels, guarding the mysteries of the past. In his hand, Father Lucien clutched a tattered book. Its pages were yellowed with age, its cover worn. But to the priest, it was more precious than gold. It was the key to his heart's darkest desires. The book, passed down through generations of voodoo priests, contained a curse so powerful, so malevolent, that it had been forbidden for centuries. But Father Lucien was beyond caring about taboos. His love for Celestine, his hatred for Henri, had driven him to the brink of madness. And now, He was ready to cross that line. He reached a clearing in the bayou, where the waters were still, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak tree, its branches twisted and gnarled, its roots reaching deep into the earth. Father Lucian knew that this was the place. The tree was a conduit, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. With trembling hands, he opened the book and began to chant. The words, in a language long forgotten, echoed through the night, sending shivers down the spines of all who heard them. The waters of the bayou began to churn, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees. As the chant reached its climax, Father Lucian took a dagger from his robes and made a deep cut on his palm. The blood, dark and thick, dripped onto the roots of the tree, which seemed to absorb it with a hungry eagerness. Suddenly, the ground shook, and a gust of wind blew out the candles Father Lucian had placed around the clearing. The darkness was absolute, the silence deafening. And then, from the depths of the bayou, came a sound. A low, rumbling growl, like that of a beast waking from a deep slumber. Father Lucian, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror, realized that he had unleashed something ancient, something evil. But it was too late to turn back now. With a final, desperate chant, he bound the dark spirits to Henry's Trans Am, sealing the car's fate. The next morning, as the first rays of the sun pierced the darkness, the car stood in its usual spot, looking as innocent as ever. But to those with the eyes to see, there was a change. The once shiny black paint now seemed deeper, more abyssal. The engine, when started, had a growl that sounded almost alive. And on the dashboard, etched in blood-red letters, was a name, Metallum Obsessum. Henri, unaware of the events of the previous night, was in for a rude awakening. For his beloved car was no longer just a machine. It was a vessel of darkness, a harbinger of doom. Chapter 3. The first sign the sun had barely begun its ascent when Henri, with a cup of steaming coffee in hand, stepped out onto the porch of his Creole townhouse. The morning air was thick with the scent of magnolias and the distant hum of the Mississippi. But as Henry's gaze settled on the driveway, the serenity of the morning shattered. The Trans Am, which he had meticulously parked the night before, was now skewed at an odd angle, its front tires resting on the cobblestone street. Henri frowned, trying to recall if he'd had too much to drink last night, but the memories were clear. He had parked it perfectly. Approaching the car, he noticed the headlights. They flickered momentarily, casting an eerie glow that seemed out of place in the morning light. Henri shook his head, attributing it to a wiring fault, and decided to check it later. However, as the day progressed, the car's behavior became increasingly erratic. At noon, while Henri was in a meeting, the car's alarm blared without provocation. Later, as he dined with Celestine at a local bistro, the headlights flashed menacingly at passers-by, causing a scene. But the most unsettling event occurred that evening. Henri, having returned home, was about to retire for the night when he heard the unmistakable roar of the Trans Am's engine. Rushing to the window, he watched in horror as the car started on its own, its headlights piercing the night like predatory eyes. It revved menacingly for a few moments before falling silent, as if mocking him. Sleep eluded Henri that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees, made him jump. His beloved car, the symbol of his success and freedom, had turned into an enigma. By morning, the whispers had begun. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the possessed vehicle, sharing tales of cars from the past that had minds of their own. The local kids, always eager for a ghost story, began to spin tales of the demon Trans Am that roamed the streets of New Orleans at night, hunting for souls. Henri, desperate to quell the rumors and restore his peace of mind, decided to consult a mechanic. But as he approached the car, a chill ran down his spine. Etched into the morning dew on the windshield were 3 words: "You are mine." The message was clear. The Trans Am, or whatever force had taken control of it, was staking its claim. And Henri, caught in a web of fear and disbelief, was its primary target. As the sun set, casting the city in a tapestry of oranges and purples, Henri knew that he was no longer in control. The car, with its dark allure and menacing presence, had become the puppet master. And Henri, along with the city he loved, was dancing to its tune. Chapter 4. The temptress ride. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows over the streets of New Orleans. The city, with its rich tapestry of history and magic, was transitioning from the vibrancy of day to the mysteries of night. Celestine, with her raven-black hair cascading down her back and her emerald eyes reflecting the last rays of the sun, stood outside Henry's house, staring at the Trans Am. She had heard the whispers, the rumors that spread like wildfire through the city. But Celestine was not one to be easily swayed by gossip. She was curious, and the allure of the car, with its deep black paint and powerful engine, was too much to resist. With a sense of determination, she approached the car. As her fingers touched the door handle, a shiver ran down her spine. The car, it seemed, was alive, pulsating with an energy that was both enticing and terrifying. Throwing caution to the wind, Celestine slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cold, almost icy, and the dashboard, with its blood-red letters spelling out Metallum Obsessum, seemed to mock her. But Celestine was undeterred. With a deep breath, she turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, its sound echoing through the empty streets. Celestine, her heart racing, pressed the accelerator. The car responded with a power that was almost supernatural. It flew through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic with a grace that belied its size. For a moment, Celestine was lost in the thrill of the ride. The wind in her hair, the power of the engine beneath her, it was intoxicating. But as the minutes turned into hours, she began to sense that something was amiss. The car, it seemed, had a mind of its own. It took turns without her command, accelerated without warning, and, on more than one occasion, came dangerously close to other vehicles. Celestine, her initial excitement replaced by growing fear, tried to regain control. But the car resisted, its power growing with every passing second. As they approached a busy intersection, the car's headlights began to glow with an eerie, otherworldly light. Celestine, her eyes wide with terror, realized that the car was not going to stop. With a scream, she yanked the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision with a truck. The car, its tires screeching, came to a halt in the middle of the intersection. Celestine, her body shaking, her mind racing, tried to process what had just happened. She had escaped death by mere inches, saved only by her quick reflexes. But as she looked around, she realized that she was not alone. The streets were filled with people, their faces a mix of shock and fear. And as they stared at the car, at the woman who had narrowly escaped its wrath, the whispers began anew. Celestine, her heart heavy, knew that she had to warn Henri. The car was not just possessed. It was evil, a force of darkness that would stop at nothing to claim its next victim. With a final glance at the Trans Am, its engine still purring, its headlights still glowing, Celestine made her way back to Henry's house. The battle against the Metallum Obsessum had only just begun. Chapter 5. Henry's desperation. The city of New Orleans, with its rich tapestry of history and culture, had always been a beacon of hope and resilience. But for Henri, its streets now felt like a maze of shadows, each corner hiding a new terror. The Trans Am, his once prized possession, had become a relentless predator, its dark intentions clear for all to see. Desperation gnawed at Henry's soul. The car's malevolent actions were escalating, and the whispers of its dark deeds echoed through the city's alleyways and bars. Each dawn brought news of another inexplicable accident, another life claimed by the Metallum Obsessum. Determined to find a solution, Henri sought the wisdom of the city's spiritual leaders. From the grandeur of St. Louis Cathedral to the dimly lit rooms of voodoo priestesses, he searched for answers. But with each visit, a chilling pattern emerged. The spiritual leaders, usually so confident and assured, would pale upon hearing his story, their eyes clouded with fear. It was in the heart of the French Quarter, in a centuries-old chapel, that Henri finally found a glimmer of hope. Sister Agatha, an elderly nun known for her deep knowledge of the city's spiritual history, listened intently as Henri recounted the car's malevolent actions. As he spoke, her face grew increasingly grave. "My child," she began, her voice trembling, "you have been ensnared in a web of betrayal and dark magic. Father Lucien, a man you once trusted, has succumbed to the allure of power and vengeance." Henry's heart raced as Sister Agatha revealed the depths of Father Lucien's treachery. Consumed by jealousy and rage, the priest had invoked an ancient curse, binding a malevolent spirit to the Trans Am. The car's thirst for souls, its relentless aggression, was a manifestation of this dark entity's insatiable hunger. The weight of the revelation bore down on Henri. The memories of shared confessions, of guidance and trust, were now tainted by the knowledge of Father Lucien's betrayal. But amidst the storm of emotions, a burning determination took root. Henri would not let this malevolent force claim his city. Sister Agatha, sensing his resolve, offered guidance. "The path ahead is fraught with danger," she warned. "But there is a way to break the curse. You must gather the city's spiritual leaders and perform a ritual of cleansing. Only then can the dark spirit be banished." As Henri left the chapel, the city's vibrant streets took on a new light. The battle for the soul of New Orleans had begun, and he was at its epicenter. With the knowledge of Father Lucien's betrayal fueling his determination, Henri set out to rally the city's spiritual leaders. But as night fell, the Trans Am's headlights glowed menacingly in the distance. The car, sensing the threat to its reign of terror, was preparing for battle. And as the engine roared to life, the city held its breath, bracing for the storm that was about to unfold. Chapter 6. The Voodoo Queen's intervention. The streets of New Orleans were alive with the sounds of jazz, the intoxicating aroma of Creole cuisine, and the whispered tales of the supernatural. Among these tales, one name stood out, a name that was both revered and feared: Madame Laveau, the Voodoo Queen. Henri, desperate to rid the Metallum Obsessum of its curse, had heard of Madame Laveau's prowess in the dark arts. With Celestine's encouragement, he decided to seek her out, hoping she held the key to their salvation. The journey led him to a secluded part of the French Quarter, where the ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss whispered secrets of the past. Nestled among these trees was a modest house, its wooden exterior painted a deep shade of purple, adorned with symbols and talismans that spoke of ancient rituals and powerful magic. Henri hesitated for a moment, the weight of the car's curse pressing down on him. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. It creaked open to reveal an elderly woman, her skin the color of rich mahogany, her eyes sharp and piercing. She wore a headscarf adorned with bones and beads, and her fingers were laden with rings that glinted in the dim light. "You seek the voodoo queen," she said, her voice deep and resonant. "I do," Henri replied, his voice trembling. "I need your help." Madame Laveau studied him for a moment, her gaze penetrating. "Come in," she finally said, leading him into a room filled with candles, incense, and various ritualistic items. As Henri recounted the tale of the Metallum Obsessum, Madame Laveau listened intently, occasionally nodding or murmuring a chant. When he finished, she was silent for a moment, her eyes closed as if in deep thought. "I sense the car's dark energy," she finally said. "It is a force to be reckoned with, but I will help you." Relief washed over Henri. "Thank you," he whispered. Madame Laveau began preparations for the ritual. She instructed Henri to bring the car to her at midnight, when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. She gathered various items: a bowl of salt water, a dagger with a bone handle, and a vial of blood-red liquid. As midnight approached, the Metallum Obsessum was brought to the clearing outside Madame Laveau's home. The car seemed to sense what was about to happen, its headlights glowing menacingly, its engine revving on its own. Madame Laveau began the ritual, chanting in a language that was ancient and powerful. She drew symbols around the car with the salt water, each one a barrier against the dark forces within. She then took the dagger and made a small cut on her palm, letting the blood drip onto the car's hood. The Metallum Obsessum reacted violently, its engine roaring to life, its lights flashing erratically. But Madame Laveau continued, her voice rising in intensity. Finally, she took the vial of red liquid and poured it over the car, the liquid sizzling upon contact. The car's protests grew louder, its movements more erratic, but Madame Laveau's voice drowned it out, her chants reaching a fevered pitch. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The Metallum Obsessum went silent, its lights dimming, its engine still. Madame Laveau, exhausted but triumphant, turned to Henri. "The car is cleansed," she said, her voice weary. "But be wary. Dark forces are not easily vanquished." Henri, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked her profusely. As he drove away, the Metallum Obsessum seemed almost docile, its dark energy held at bay. But as Madame Laveau watched them go, she knew that the battle was far from over. The car's curse might have been weakened, but it was not broken. And she knew that the Metallum Obsessum would not go down without a fight. Chapter 7. The car's retaliation. The heart of New Orleans, usually pulsating with life, was eerily silent as dusk settled. The streets, which once echoed with the melodies of jazz and the laughter of its inhabitants, now bore witness to an impending confrontation. In a secluded courtyard, surrounded by ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss, a circle of the city's most revered spiritual leaders had gathered. At the center of this assembly was the Trans Am, its dark silhouette contrasting sharply against the flickering candles that surrounded it. Henri, his face etched with determination, stood alongside Sister Agatha, who led the ritual. The air was thick with tension, and every eye was fixed on the car, waiting for a sign, a reaction. As the incantations began, a low hum emanated from the vehicle, like a beast roused from slumber. The spiritual leaders, their voices harmonizing in a haunting melody, called upon the spirits of the land to cleanse the malevolent force bound to the car. But as the ritual intensified, so did the car's resistance. The headlights, previously dormant, flared to life, casting a blinding, otherworldly glow. The engine, without ignition, roared in defiance, its sound echoing like the screams of tormented souls. Suddenly, the courtyard was plunged into chaos. Electrical malfunctions rippled through the area. Streetlights flickered and died, plunging the surroundings into darkness, only to be illuminated by the car's menacing glow. The temperature, previously balmy, plummeted, each breath visible in the freezing air. Then, just as abruptly, a wave of oppressive heat swept through, causing the candles to flare wildly. Sister Agatha, her voice unwavering, urged the assembly to hold firm. But the car's retaliation was relentless. The ground beneath them trembled, and the ancient oaks groaned as if in pain. The very air seemed to thicken, making each breath a labor. As the final incantation was uttered, a deafening silence enveloped the courtyard. The spiritual leaders, exhausted and drenched in sweat, looked to the car, hoping to see a sign of the curse's release. But the Metallum Obsessum stood defiant, its presence even more foreboding than before. The ritual, meant to cleanse, had failed. The car's curse had not only resisted the combined might of New Orleans spiritual leaders but had grown stronger. The Trans Am, now more than just a vessel of metal and machinery, had become a symbol of pure, unbridled evil. Henri, his heart heavy with the weight of failure, approached the car. Its headlights, now dimmed, seemed to watch him, like the eyes of a predator sizing up its prey. The message was clear. The battle for the soul of New Orleans was far from over. As the spiritual leaders disbanded, whispers of fear and uncertainty filled the air. The city, already on edge, now faced an even greater threat. And as the night deepened, the streets echoed with the car's haunting refrain, a reminder of the darkness that lay ahead. Chapter 8. The streets whisper New Orleans, a city steeped in history and mystery, had seen its fair share of legends and ghost stories. But none had ever gripped its heart as tightly as the tale of the Metallum Obsessum. As dawn broke, casting a golden hue over the Mississippi, the streets whispered with tales of the car's latest hauntings. In the bustling markets of the French Quarter, vendors exchanged stories of the car's eerie prowls. They spoke of how it would appear, seemingly out of nowhere, its sleek black form reflecting the city lights, luring unsuspecting victims with its undeniable beauty. But this allure was a deadly trap. Those who approached, drawn by its charm, would soon face its wrath. Madeline, a young woman with dreams of becoming a jazz singer, was one such victim. She had been walking home from a late-night gig when she spotted the Trans Am parked by the riverside. Its beauty, combined with her love for classic cars, proved irresistible. But as she approached, the car's headlights flared, blinding her. The next morning, her lifeless body was found by the river, her face frozen in a mask of terror. Then there was Antoine, a street performer known for his lively tap dance routines. He had been drawn to the car's melodic engine purr, thinking it to be the rhythm of a new song. But as he danced closer, the car roared to life, its wheels spinning with deadly intent. Antoine's last dance was one of fear and desperation, trying to escape the car's relentless pursuit. His mangled body was discovered at dawn, the cobblestones stained with his blood. With each death, the whispers grew louder, and fear gripped the city's heart. Parents warned their children to stay away from the Trans Am. Lovers avoided the streets where it was rumored to prowl, and even the bravest souls crossed themselves when they spoke its name. But the car, it seemed, thrived on this fear. With each life it claimed, its power grew. The engine roared louder, the headlights shone brighter, and its presence became even more menacing. It was as if the souls it consumed were fueling its dark energy, making it unstoppable. Henri, tormented by guilt and despair, watched as his beloved city was held hostage by the very car he had once cherished. The weight of each death bore down on him, and he knew he had to act. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and the stakes had never been higher. As night fell, casting the city in shadows, Henri made a vow. He would reclaim the streets from the Metallum Obsessum, no matter the cost. The battle for the soul of New Orleans was far from over, and the next chapter was about to begin. Chapter 9. The mechanics encounter Remy LeBlanc, with grease-streaked hands and a reputation as the best mechanic in New Orleans, had fixed everything from tractors to tour buses. His garage, a cavernous space filled with the scent of oil and metal, was a testament to his decades of expertise. But nothing in his years of experience could have prepared him for the Metallum Obsessum. Word had spread about the cursed car, and Remy, always up for a challenge, believed he could dismantle the Trans Am, thereby ending its reign of terror. With a mixture of skepticism and bravado, he had boasted to his regulars, "There ain't a car in this world that Remy can't fix or take apart." As the black ragtop convertible was towed into his garage, Remy felt a shiver run down his spine. The car, even in its stationary state, exuded an aura of malevolence. Pushing aside his unease, Remy approached with tools in hand, determined to reduce the car to its constituent parts. The first sign that something was amiss came when Remy tried to disconnect the battery. No sooner had he removed the cables than they reattached themselves, sparks flying. Startled, Remy tried again, only to witness the same phenomenon. Growing frustrated, he decided to drain the car's fluids, hoping to incapacitate it. But as he unscrewed the oil cap, a thick, black, tar-like substance oozed out, wrapping around his hand and pulling him closer to the engine. Panicking, Remy used all his strength to break free, the dark substance burning his skin. Determined not to be bested, Remy decided to tackle the car's interior. But as he cut into the upholstery, he was met with a horrifying sight. Instead of foam and fabric, he found what looked like pulsating flesh and veins. The car's seats seemed to be alive, breathing, and as Remy recoiled in horror, they reached out, trying to ensnare him. By now, terror had replaced Remy's initial skepticism. The car was not just possessed. It was a living entity, its parts working in unison to protect and repair itself. And as Remy realized the depth of the danger he was in, the garage lights began to flicker. The Trans Am roared to life, its engine's growl echoing menacingly. Headlights blazing, it lunged at Remy, who tried to escape. But the car was relentless, its movements precise and predatory. The other mechanics, drawn by the commotion, arrived just in time to witness a horrifying scene. The car, having cornered Remy, was closing in, its doors opening and shutting with deadly intent. Despite their efforts to intervene, the Metallum Obsessum was unstoppable. And as its engine revved one final time, Remy's screams were drowned out, adding to the car's growing tally of victims. The garage, once a place of repair and restoration, had become a crime scene. And as the police cordoned off the area, the whispers grew louder. The Metallum Obsessum was not just a car. It was a force of nature, its appetite for souls insatiable. Chapter 10. Celestine's vision. The night was thick with the scent of jasmine as Celestine lay in her bed, the soft hum of a ceiling fan above her. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on her mind, and sleep seemed elusive. But as the hours ticked by, a deep slumber finally claimed her, pulling her into a dreamscape that was both haunting and revelatory. She found herself on the outskirts of New Orleans, in a place where time seemed to stand still. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over a vast graveyard. Tombstones, some ancient and others eerily new, stretched as far as the eye could see. And at the center of this necropolis stood the Metallum Obsessum, its black form gleaming in the moonlight. Drawn to it, Celestine approached the car. But as she drew closer, ghostly apparitions began to emerge from the ground. Each spirit, bearing the mark of a violent death, reached out to her, their eyes filled with pain and sorrow. Madeline, with her dreams of jazz stardom, appeared beside the car, her voice a haunting whisper. Antoine, his tap shoes still echoing with the rhythm of his last dance, reached out, seeking solace. As the spirits converged, a horrifying tableau unfolded. Celestine saw each victim's final moments, their lives cruelly snuffed out by the car's malevolent force. The weight of their collective anguish bore down on her, and she felt a deep, soul-crushing despair. But amidst the sea of sorrow, a revelation emerged. Each spirit, in their own way, pointed to a single figure, Father Lucien. The priest, his face twisted with malice, stood at the periphery, watching the carnage with a satisfied smirk. It was clear to Celestine that he was the puppet master, the architect of the car's reign of terror. Awakening with a start, Celestine was drenched in sweat, her heart racing. The dream, with its haunting clarity, had revealed the depth of Father Lucien's betrayal. The man she had once revered, seeking guidance and solace in times of need, was now the embodiment of pure evil. Determined to confront him and end the curse, Celestine set out at dawn. The streets of New Orleans, usually alive with the sounds of jazz and laughter, were eerily silent, the city's inhabitants cowed by the car's reign of terror. As she approached the church, its Gothic spires casting long shadows, Celestine steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. Father Lucien, with his knowledge of dark magic and the car's origins, was a formidable adversary. But Celestine, armed with the truth and the Spirit's blessings, was resolute. The church's heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. At the altar stood Father Lucien, his back turned, deep in prayer. But as Celestine approached, he turned, his eyes cold and calculating. The stage was set for a battle of wills, a confrontation that would determine the fate of New Orleans and its inhabitants. And as the first words were spoken, the air grew thick with tension, the weight of the past and the promise of the future hanging in the balance. Chapter 11. Father Lucien's confession. The hallowed halls of the church, usually a sanctuary of peace and reflection, were now charged with an electric tension. The stained glass windows, depicting scenes of divine intervention, seemed to cast judgmental glares upon Father Lucien as Celestine and Henri approached him. Celestine, her face a mask of determination, was the first to speak. "Why, Father? Why unleash such evil upon this city?" Father Lucien, his once proud posture now slouched, looked up, his eyes betraying a mix of guilt and defiance. "You cannot begin to understand the depths of my desires, the burning jealousy that consumed me." Henri, his voice shaking with rage, stepped forward. "You took an oath, Father, to protect and guide your flock. Instead, you've led them to slaughter." The priest chuckled, a hollow sound that echoed through the church. "It was never about the flock, Henri. It was about power, about control. I watched as you paraded through the streets with that car, with Celestine by your side. Everything I ever wanted, but could never have." Celestine, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, "But why the car?" Why bind such a malevolent force to something so innocent? Father Lucien's gaze darkened. The car was the perfect vessel, a symbol of your success, of everything I envied. By cursing it, I could not only hurt you but also gain the power I so desperately craved. Henri, his hands clenched into fists, demanded, "How do we stop it? How do we break the curse?" The priest leaned in, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. The Metallum Obsessum has a goal, a purpose. It seeks to consume 100 souls. Only then will its hunger be sated, its power complete. Celestine gasped, realization dawning. And how many has it taken so far? Father Lucien smirked, 97. The weight of the revelation was crushing. With only 3 souls left to claim, time was running out. The city's fate hung in the balance, and every moment counted. Henri, his voice filled with urgency, pressed on. There must be a way to break the curse, to free the souls it has consumed. Father Lucien, his demeanor shifting from defiance to resignation, replied, "There is a ritual, ancient and powerful. But it comes with great risk. The car will resist, and its wrath will be unlike anything you've ever seen." Celestine, her resolve unwavering, declared, "We'll take that risk. For the city, for the souls lost, we'll do whatever it takes." As they left the church, the path ahead was clear. The battle for the soul of New Orleans was entering its final, deadly phase. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the city, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine its fate. Chapter 12. The Midnight Chase. The city of New Orleans, with its rich tapestry of history and culture, had seen many a midnight chase. But none as chilling as the one that unfolded on this fateful night. The Metallum Obsessum, sensing its exposure and the impending threat, roared to life. Its engine, a symphony of power and malevolence, echoed through the narrow streets, announcing its deadly intent. The car, no longer just a vessel of metal and rubber, was now a predator, its every move calculated to strike fear into the hearts of its prey. Henri and Celestine, realizing the gravity of the situation, jumped into Henry's truck, its engine protesting as they sped off in pursuit. The streets of New Orleans, usually alive with the sounds of jazz and laughter, were eerily silent, save for the roar of engines and the screech of tires. The chase led them through the French Quarter, with its historic buildings and cobblestone streets. The Metallum Obsessum, with its supernatural agility, darted in and out of alleyways, trying to shake off its pursuers. But Henri, with his intimate knowledge of the city, was always one step behind, anticipating its every move. Celestine, her eyes scanning the road ahead, shouted directions, her voice barely audible over the din. "Left. It's heading towards the river." As they approached the Mississippi, the car's tactics became even more desperate. It swerved onto the pedestrian walkway, sending tourists scrambling for safety. Its headlights, glowing with an otherworldly intensity, seemed to hypnotize its victims, drawing them closer before striking with deadly precision. Henri, pushing his truck to its limits, managed to corner the car by the river's edge. But just as they thought they had it trapped, the Metallum Obsessum unleashed its full fury. With a deafening roar, it charged at them, its intent clear: to send both truck and occupants into the murky depths below. Celestine, thinking quickly, grabbed the wheel, steering them out of harm's way just in the nick of time. The car, thwarted in its attempt, let out a scream of frustration, its engine revving louder than ever. The chase continued, a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the stakes higher than ever. Through the Garden District, past the iconic cemeteries, and into the heart of the city, the two vehicles danced a dance of death. As dawn approached, the car, sensing its time was running out, made one final, desperate move. With a burst of speed, it headed towards St. Louis Cathedral, its path clear. But Henri, summoning every ounce of strength, managed to intercept it, sending both vehicles crashing into the square. The impact was deafening, metal on metal, a cacophony of destruction. And as the dust settled, the once mighty Metallum Obsessum lay defeated, its reign of terror finally at an end. Henri and Celestine, battered but alive, emerged from the wreckage, their bond stronger than ever. The city of New Orleans, having survived yet another trial, would forever remember this night, the night of the midnight chase. Chapter 13. The bayou's secret. The bayou, with its sprawling wetlands and ancient cypress trees draped in Spanish moss, had always been a place of mystery and magic. Legends spoke of spirits that roamed its depths, of ancient rituals performed under the moonlight, and of secrets buried deep within its murky waters. Following the harrowing chase, Henri and Celestine found themselves on the outskirts of this enigmatic place. The Metallum Obsessum, though momentarily defeated, had managed to find its way to the bayou, as if drawn by some unseen force. As they ventured deeper, the sounds of the city faded, replaced by the symphony of nature, the chirping of crickets, the croaking of frogs, and the distant hoot of an owl. The air was thick with humidity, and every step they took was met with the squelch of mud underfoot. Guided only by the soft glow of a lantern, they stumbled upon a clearing. And there, amidst the tall reeds and lily pads, stood a shrine. It was a crude structure, made of sticks and animal bones, but its purpose was unmistakable. At its center, surrounded by candles and offerings, was a miniature replica of the Metallum Obsessum. Celestine, her voice barely above a whisper, said, This is a place of worship. But who would worship such a monstrosity? Henri, examining the shrine more closely, replied, Not who, but what. The bayou is home to ancient spirits, entities that predate even the city itself. They are drawn to power, to energy, and the car, with its insatiable hunger for souls, would be a beacon to them. As they pondered the implications, a soft chanting filled the air. It was melodic, hypnotic, and seemed to come from all directions. Following the sound, they came upon a group of hooded figures, their faces obscured by shadows, performing a ritual by the water's edge. The leader, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. You seek to break the curse, to free the souls trapped within the car, she intoned. Celestine, taken aback, replied, Yes, but how do you know? The woman, her gaze unwavering, said, The bayou sees all, knows all. The car's curse is tied to this place, to the ancient magic that flows through its waters. But breaking it will not be easy. Henri, desperation evident in his voice, pleaded, Tell us what to do. We'll do anything. The woman, her expression grave, replied, The ritual to break the curse requires a sacrifice, a willing soul to take the place of those trapped within the car. Celestine, realization dawning, whispered, You mean. ... The woman nodded, One of you must take their place, to appease the spirits and break the curse. The weight of the decision bore down on them, the gravity of the situation all too clear. The bayou, with its ancient magic and secrets, held the key to ending the car's reign of terror. But at what cost? Chapter 14. Madame Laveau's Last Stand. The legends of New Orleans spoke of many powerful figures, but none as enigmatic and revered as Madame Laveau, the voodoo queen. Though she had passed from the mortal realm over a century ago, tales of her power and influence persisted, whispered in hushed tones in the city's dimly lit corners. As Henri and Celestine grappled with the weight of their discovery in the bayou, a figure emerged from the shadows, her presence commanding and ethereal. Dressed in a flowing white gown, her dark eyes seemed to pierce the very soul. It was none other than the spirit of Madame Laveau. "I have watched from the beyond," she began, her voice echoing with authority, "as this abomination has wreaked havoc upon my beloved city. The time has come to end its reign of terror." Celestine, awestruck, managed to find her voice. "But how? The curse is too powerful." Madame Laveau, her gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of the Metallum Obsessum, replied, "The car draws its power from the souls it has consumed. But I have power too, power that has been passed down through generations. Together, we can weaken its defenses." Without waiting for a response, she began to chant, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. The air grew thick with energy, and the very ground beneath them seemed to pulse with life. As the chant reached its crescendo, a blinding light enveloped the car, its once menacing form now writhing in apparent agony. Seizing the opportunity, Henri and Celestine approached, their every step filled with purpose. But the Metallum Obsessum was not to be defeated so easily. With a deafening roar, it sprang to life, its headlights blazing with malevolent intent. The car, now more beast than machine, unleashed its full arsenal of powers. Electrical malfunctions caused nearby streetlights to explode, showering the area with sparks. The temperature around the car plummeted, a chilling frost forming on its sleek surface. And with a force that seemed almost supernatural, it lunged at its adversaries. Madame Laveau, undeterred, continued her assault. With each incantation, the car's defenses weakened, its movements becoming more erratic. But the battle was taking its toll on her as well. With every spell, her form grew more translucent, her energy waning. Celestine, realizing the gravity of the situation, joined in the chant, her voice merging with Madame Laveau's in a harmonious duet. Together, they summoned the spirits of the bayou, imploring them to aid in the battle. The car, sensing its impending defeat, made one final, desperate charge. But Henri, drawing upon reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed, managed to intercept it, sending both man and machine crashing to the ground. As the dust settled, the once mighty Metallum Obsessum lay defeated, its reign of terror finally at an end. Madame Laveau, her task complete, turned to Henri and Celestine, a smile playing on her lips. "The curse is broken," she whispered, her form beginning to fade. "But remember, the battle between good and evil is eternal. Stay vigilant and protect this city." And with that, she was gone, leaving behind a legacy of power, sacrifice, and a city forever in her debt. Chapter 15. The final ritual, the heart of New Orleans, still pulsating with the aftermath of the fierce battle, now bore witness to a gathering of forces unlike any it had seen before. The Metallum Obsessum, though weakened, still radiated an aura of malevolence, its dark energy palpable in the air. Henri, his clothes torn and face streaked with sweat and grime, looked at Celestine. Her determination, evident in her steely gaze, gave him strength. They both knew that the final confrontation was at hand, and the stakes had never been higher. Madame Laveau, her spirit form shimmering in the dim light, approached them. "The time has come," she intoned, her voice echoing with authority. "The car's defenses are down, but its spirit remains strong. We must perform the ritual, and we must do it now." In the center of the square, a large circle was drawn, its perimeter marked with symbols of protection and power. At its center stood the Metallum Obsessum, its once gleaming exterior now marred with scars from the battle. As the trio took their positions around the circle, Madame Laveau began to chant, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. The air grew thick with energy, and the very ground beneath them seemed to pulse with life. Henri and Celestine, guided by the Voodoo Queen's instructions, began to recite the incantations, their voices merging in a harmonious duet. The symbols around the circle began to glow, casting an ethereal light that seemed to push back the darkness. The Metallum Obsessum, sensing the impending threat, began to resist. Its engine roared to life, its headlights blazing with malevolent intent. The temperature around the car plummeted, a chilling frost forming on its sleek surface. And with a force that seemed almost supernatural, it tried to break free from the circle's confines. But the combined power of Henri, Celestine, and Madame Laveau proved too strong. With each incantation, the car's spirit weakened, its movements becoming more erratic. The ritual reached its climax, the energy in the square reaching a fever pitch. And then, with a deafening roar, a blinding light enveloped the car, its form disintegrating before their very eyes. As the dust settled, all that remained was an empty shell, its dark energy vanquished, its reign of terror finally at an end. Madame Laveau, her task complete, turned to Henri and Celestine, a smile playing on her lips. "The curse is broken," she whispered, her form beginning to fade. "But remember, the battle between good and evil is eternal. Stay vigilant and protect this city." Henri and Celestine, exhausted but victorious, looked at each other, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced the very embodiment of evil and emerged triumphant. And as dawn broke over the city, a new day began, free from the shadow of the Metallum Obsessum. Chapter 16. The car's last victim, the first light of dawn, painted the horizon with hues of pink and gold, casting a serene glow over the city of New Orleans. The square, which had just witnessed a fierce battle of wills, now lay in a deceptive calm. The Metallum Obsessum, seemingly defeated, stood silent and still, its once menacing aura now diminished. Henri and Celestine, their bodies weary but spirits elated, exchanged a look of relief. The nightmare, it seemed, was finally over. But as they turned to thank Madame Laveau, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The car, in a final act of defiance, had targeted the one soul that held immense power, Madame Laveau. Its headlights, which had been dim and lifeless moments ago, now glowed with a malevolent intensity, fixated on the Voodoo Queen. Madame Laveau, sensing the impending danger, began to chant, her voice echoing with authority. But the car, drawing upon its last reserves of dark energy, lunged at her with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. Henri, reacting on instinct, tried to intercept it, but the force of the impact sent him flying. Celestine, her eyes wide with horror, could only watch as the car closed in on its target. But Madame Laveau, ever the embodiment of grace and power, stood her ground. With a final, defiant incantation, she summoned a protective barrier, a shimmering wall of light that held the car at bay. The Metallum Obsessum, its energy waning, tried to break through, its engine roaring in frustration. But the barrier, strengthened by Madame Laveau's immense power, held firm. Realizing that the car sought to consume her soul to replenish its dark energy, Madame Laveau made a heart-wrenching decision. With a look of determination, she turned to Henri and Celestine, her voice filled with urgency. "Go! Save yourselves. I will hold it off." Celestine, tears streaming down her face, protested, "No. We can't leave you." But Madame Laveau, her gaze unwavering, replied, "This is my destiny, my sacrifice to make. Remember me and protect this city." And with that, she channeled all her energy into the barrier, causing it to glow with an intensity that was almost blinding. The car, sensing its opportunity, charged at her one last time. The impact was deafening, a cacophony of metal on metal, light against darkness. And as the dust settled, all that remained was an empty shell, its dark energy vanquished once and for all. Henri and Celestine, their hearts heavy with grief, approached the spot where Madame Laveau had made her final stand. All that remained was a small amulet, a token of her immense power and sacrifice. As they held the amulet, a soft voice echoed in the wind, a voice filled with love and wisdom. "Remember me and protect this city." And with that, the spirit of Madame Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans, took her place among the legends, her legacy forever etched in the annals of history. Chapter 17. The curse broken. The sun, now higher in the sky, cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of New Orleans. The square, which had been the epicenter of a battle between light and darkness, was now bathed in a golden glow. Birds began to sing, their melodies a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had enveloped the area just moments ago. In the center of the square stood the Metallum Obsessum, its once gleaming exterior now marred with scars and dents. But more noticeable was the absence of its malevolent aura. The car, which had once been a vessel of pure evil, now lay lifeless and inert, its reign of terror finally at an end. Henri, his body bruised and battered, approached the car with caution. He placed a hand on its hood, half expecting it to spring to life. But all he felt was cold metal, devoid of any energy. Celestine, her eyes red from crying, joined him. Together, they looked at the car, their emotions a mix of relief, grief, and disbelief. The nightmare, it seemed, was finally over. As they stood there, lost in their thoughts, a soft breeze began to blow, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and magnolia. It was as if nature itself was trying to cleanse the area of the dark energy that had once permeated it. Henri, taking a deep breath, turned to Celestine. "It's over," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "Thanks to Madame Laveau, the curse is broken." Celestine, tears streaming down her face, nodded. "She sacrificed herself to save us, to save the city. We owe her everything." The two of them, bound by their shared experience, embraced, finding solace in each other's arms. The weight of their losses was immense, but they also knew that they had been given a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild and move forward. As the day wore on, the residents of New Orleans began to emerge from their homes, drawn to the square by tales of the epic battle that had taken place. They looked at the Metallum Obsessum with a mix of fear and awe, their whispers a testament to the car's dark legacy. But as the sun began to set, casting the city in a warm, orange glow, a sense of hope began to permeate the air. The curse was broken, the evil vanquished. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the city of New Orleans, with its rich history and vibrant culture, began to heal, its spirit stronger than ever. Chapter 18. Father Lucien's fate. The once revered St. Augustine's Church, with its towering spires and stained glass windows, now stood as a silent testament to the sins of one man. Father Lucien, the once beloved priest, had become the pariah of New Orleans. The whispers of his betrayal, his descent into darkness, and his role in the curse of the Metallum Obsessum had spread like wildfire, turning the tide of public opinion against him. Inside the church, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The pews, usually filled with devout parishioners, were now empty. The candles, which once burned brightly, now flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Father Lucian, his once pristine robes now tattered and stained, knelt at the altar, his hands clasped in prayer. The weight of his sins bore down on him, each one a reminder of the path he had chosen. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned." But as he prayed, he felt no solace, no divine intervention. It was as if the heavens themselves had turned their back on him. Days turned into weeks, and still, Father Lucian remained in the church, seeking redemption. But the community, once so welcoming, now shunned him. Children were warned to stay away, and adults crossed the street to avoid him. The church, once a beacon of hope, had become a symbol of betrayal. One fateful night, as a storm raged outside, Father Lucian made a decision. Packing a small bag, he left the church, his footsteps echoing in the empty nave. As he stepped outside, the rain lashed against his face, each drop a reminder of the tears he had shed. He wandered the streets of New Orleans, the city he had once called home. But everywhere he went, he was met with cold stares and whispered accusations. Realizing that he could never find redemption here, he decided to leave, to seek solace elsewhere. As dawn broke, Father Lucian was seen boarding a train, his destination unknown. And just like that, he vanished, leaving behind a city scarred by his actions. In the years that followed, tales of Father Lucian's fate became the stuff of legend. Some said he had found a remote monastery, where he spent his days in penance. Others claimed he had been seen in far-off lands, still seeking redemption. But the truth remained a mystery, adding to the lore of the Metallum Obsessum and the curse that had befallen New Orleans. And as the years turned into decades, Father Lucian's fate became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the consequences of one's actions and the price of betrayal. Chapter 19. The car's legacy, the heart of New Orleans, with its vibrant streets and lively jazz music, had always been a magnet for tourists. But now, there was a new attraction in town, one that drew crowds from all over the world. Tucked away in a dimly lit corner of the French Quarter was the infamous Metallum Obsessum, the car that had once terrorized the city. Encased in a glass chamber, the black ragtop convertible 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am stood as a silent testament to its dark past. Its once gleaming exterior, now scarred and battered, told a story of power, betrayal, and redemption. Plaques detailing its history lined the walls, each one recounting a chapter of its reign of terror. From its possession by Father Lucian to its final confrontation with Madame Laveau, the car's story was laid bare for all to see. Tourists flocked to the exhibit, their faces a mix of awe and fear. Some took photos, while others whispered prayers, their fingers making the sign of the cross. But all left with a sense of unease, a reminder of the car's dark legacy. Overseeing the exhibit were Henri and Celestine, the two people who knew the car's story better than anyone. They had become its guardians, ensuring that its tale was told with accuracy and respect. Henri, his once youthful face now lined with age, would often recount his experiences with the car, his voice filled with emotion. "It was a force to be reckoned with," he would say, his eyes distant. But in the end, love and sacrifice prevailed. Celestine, her beauty undiminished by time, would often join him, adding her own perspective to the tale. It was a journey of discovery, she would say, her voice soft. We learned about the depths of human emotion, the power of love, and the consequences of our actions. As the years went by, the exhibit became a staple of New Orleans tourism. Schools would bring their students, teaching them about the city's history and the lessons to be learned from the car's story. And every year, on the anniversary of Madame Laveau's sacrifice, a candlelit vigil would be held, honoring her memory and the lives lost to the Metallum Obsessum. But through it all, Henri and Celestine remained vigilant, ensuring that the car's legacy was preserved. They knew that while the curse may have been broken, the car's story was far from over. And as they stood side by side, watching the crowds come and go, they took solace in the knowledge that they had played a part in shaping the car's legacy, ensuring that its tale would be told for generations to come. Chapter 20. A new beginning. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden hue over the city of New Orleans. The streets, usually bustling with activity, were now quiet, the only sound being the distant hum of jazz music. The French Quarter, with its historic buildings and narrow alleyways, stood as a testament to the city's rich history, a history that Henri and Celestine had been a part of. As they stood on the balcony of their home, overlooking the city they had called home for so long, they felt a mix of emotions. The memories of their time with the Metallum Obsessum were still fresh, each one a reminder of the pain, the fear, and the love they had experienced. Celestine, her eyes glistening with tears, turned to Henri. "It's time," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "We need to leave, to start anew, free from the shadow of the car." Henri, his face lined with age but his spirit undiminished, nodded in agreement. "We've done all we can here," he said, his voice firm. "The car's story will live on, but we need to move on, to find peace." And so, with heavy hearts, they began to pack their belongings, each item a reminder of their time in New Orleans. The photos, the mementos, the memories, all were carefully packed away, ready for the next chapter of their lives. As dawn broke, they boarded a train, their destination unknown. They left behind a city that had been both their home and their battleground, a place of love and betrayal, of hope and despair. But as the train pulled away, they knew that they were leaving behind more than just a city. They were leaving behind a legacy, a tale of a cursed car and the two people who had fought against it. The legend of the Metallum Obsessum would live on, a testament to the power of love, betrayal, and redemption. And as the train chugged along, Henri and Celestine looked out of the window, the city of New Orleans slowly fading into the distance. They held each other close, their hearts filled with hope for the future, knowing that they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their love unbreakable. In the years that followed, tales of their bravery spread, becoming the stuff of legend. And while they may have left New Orleans, their story lived on, a beacon of hope for all those who faced adversity, a reminder that love could conquer all. We hope you have enjoyed our paranormal scary untold story about Metallum Obsessum. Please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. Come to listen to more of our scary stories collection. Paranormal Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal Untold Stories.